Corey, I'm grateful to represent Cypress Medicine Hat for 10 years, the full extent of that masochism you were talking about. And I bet you 30 or 40% of my constituents now stop me and thank me and ask me to strongly consider running as an independent again. And I'm certainly, weighing all the options and looking at that. Yeah, I've had the great opportunity to speak up and highlight some important things. Yeah, and I'm looking forward for the opportunity to continue to do that. Corey, as we look at the UCP leadership race right now, many of my constituents are telling me, that they're disappointed that it's underachieved so far. They're looking for more taxes or more talk about lower taxes, more talk about smaller government that spends less. I mean, how often did Jason Kenney promise, a referendum on putting property rights in the Constitution? I mean, large parts of Alberta are rural. And, Corey, maybe the thing I've heard the most about the last little while is rural Alberta feels more disadvantaged than ever. I'm hearing time and time again about Alberta Works not being there to provide adequate timely support. His land title's 11 weeks to get something transferred. And the vast majority of these emergency room closures, temporary and more permanent, have been in rural Alberta. It's a time for change.
Yeah. And then, some of the tone and things like that. And we're seeing some unprecedented stuff. It's kind of what I was talking a bit with Jay about too, with the federal race. And then this provincial race, I mean, you can kind of speak from watching from the outside. You've been involved in politics for quite some time as well. When have we ever seen a sitting leader, even though outgoing, whether it's an interim leader or a finishing up leader, directly wade into a leadership race that's active like we had with Jason Kenney just the other day?
Yeah, that's appalling. That's so short-sighted. I mean, I stood on the steps the day after he lost his leadership review and decided to resign, calling for his immediate resignation. I was so surprised that cabinet and caucus let him continue as the interim leader. That was the opportunity for whoever the interim leader chosen could have been to start to rebuild unity, to start to reach out to Albertans, to start to repair, all these areas where Jason Kenney hasn't met expectations. And then now for him to come out on the weekend and question, one of the contenders' ideas. First of all, to me, it shows, how timid he's been in office. What is he so scared of? Try something. Albertans every day are telling me that it's time to fight hard for a fair deal with Ottawa. Secondly, it's not the Crown representative's job to overturn, or to decide on what is provincial jurisdiction and what is federal jurisdiction. That's up to the courts. And Corey, if a Supreme Court made a political decision again, like the carbon tax against Alberta, it only grows independence and separation anxiety. It only grows the strength of Albertans' willingness to fight for a fair deal. So for Premier Kenney to try to interfere on a taxpayer-funded radio show, a proper interim leader should have been chosen. A proper interim leader would stay out of that and focus on Alberta families and communities instead.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the radio show that he was on, because I mean, okay, fine, you're going to do a weekly show and speak to Albertans. It's not a bad initiative. Ralph Klein did that a while back, and I think even Notley did a bit. Hey, opportunities for people to hear from the Premier, great. But if you're going to suddenly turn it into something to start meddling within an inter-party leadership race, you're abusing that seat, with that show. I mean, that was supposed to be for the Premier speaking, not a partisan shot at somebody running to replace you in the leadership race.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd say at this point, he's obviously a lame duck. I mean, until October 6th, we're less than 2 months away from that. Why are we doing this? I mean, it's just time to focus on the future. It's time to focus on Alberta families and Alberta communities. And again, Corey, I think at this point in time, the race has underachieved. It's been uninspiring. It hasn't connected Albertans like it needs to in order for the UCP to hold government against the NDP, 9 or 10 months from now. Albertans are telling me every day, hey, let's talk about the type of culture we want. Instead of a premier running around giving $2 million here, $5 million there, let's lower taxes. Let's get back to our 10% flat tax. Let's raise the personal exemption so Alberta people have an opportunity to have more choice and get further ahead. I mean, what a no-brainer to re-index tax brackets versus inflation. What is the real inflation rate? Reported at 8 points, but it's much higher than that. And our small business tax. Our small businesses pay 2% tax on top of the 10% they already paid to Albertans. I mean, in most parts of the province, small business is still really struggling. Let's give these people some hope and opportunity to get back on their feet and provide all Albertans competition and choice and better pricing. These things aren't being talked about. I want to see more discussion about utility and insurance rates. We need way more competition in the insurance industry to bring the rates down. That's clear with what's happened with condos and cars and that kind of thing in the last little couple of years. Clearly with utility rates, it's sad, Corey, that you and me in 2011, 2012, and many other wild rosers clearly put it out there to Albertans that the PC overbuild of the transmission lines was going to come home to haunt us. And now we have seniors that can't afford their utility bills, mostly because of the cost of transmission and auxiliary charges. Let's come up with a solution for those things.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're in Medicine Hat, speaking of an area that learned to make a benefit of their local resources, in that it was the Medicine Hat gas company that was formed and supplied things out there. It was kind of unique that way because of those natural gas deposits around. And when we're talking about utilities and things that we're paying, I mean, we're an energy powerhouse, but if you look at your utility bill, it's not the cost of the actual power generation or the source of the power. It's 100 other little things that they nickel and dime and tax you with that beats you into the ground. And you can't hide from those things. Utilities are a necessity if you don't want to freeze to death.
Oh, absolutely. We've got that so far wrong, as so many people have put out there. But let's look at the bigger picture for a second. We've got all the candidates for the UCP leadership, particularly the supposed leader, talking about net zero emissions. What blows my mind, Corey, is I wasn't elected to help Justin Trudeau and our oil and gas industry. The reports I've seen on net zero emissions mean it could be a job loss of as high as 150 to 200,000 for Albertans. We all know that we're a carbon and an agriculture-based economy, and thank God for the rest of Canada we are. We've been carrying the heavy water the last little while. So let's just accept that how good of environmental producers we are now. And, let's carbon capture and storage is another thing that in the Wild Rose we used to fight against. And the continuation of that will make electricity rates 3 times more expensive than they need to be. Corey, I can't afford 3 times more in my electricity bills, and Albertans can't. And why would we? Why wouldn't we try to make things as competitive and as affordable for Albertans as possible?
Yeah, and then we get on to other things as well. As you're saying, it really comes to rural Canadians in general, I think, aren't properly respected by our government at all. I mean, that's a lot of the split that's been going on. And why aren't we hearing more from our provincial government? I mean, it's not shocking to see Trudeau do something as idiotic as to go after agricultural producers with fertilizer bans potentially. But you would think our provincial government should be very, vociferously standing up for our rural producers to say, hey, this is not an option. It's not in the cards. Back off right now, and let's get some commitments from you guys not to be cracking down on our ag producers. But we're not hearing anything about that.
We're not hearing anything about it, and it's very, very surprising. I guess the Sovereignty Act, if it comes to pass, may give the opportunity to challenge that. But clearly. Let's start to use a notwithstanding clause. Let's start to build the Alberta agenda items so we can, gain leverage with Ottawa. Clearly collecting our own taxes like Quebec does would go a long, long way to show Ottawa and Alberta citizens that we are strong and independent. We can stand on our own. It's one of the reasons, Corey, when I had my dissenting opinion 18 months ago on the Fair Deal panel, my solution was, hey, let's give Ottawa 3 years notice. 3 years from Ottawa, you've got 3 years to give Alberta a fair deal. 3 years from now, we're going to hold an independence referendum, and we'll let Albertans evaluate how well you've done with this. It is past time for Ottawa to accept that. Alberta is a leader, that Alberta families need every opportunity for maximum individual opportunity and choice. And I don't know, I'm just not seeing it in the race right now.
Yeah, well, and I mean, so something I'm sure you've heard from a number of people lately, and then, it's getting speculative, but we asked about that during the debate we held in Calgary last week as well, was in the case of you and Todd as well. I mean, would any of the leaders welcome you back in a caucus? Most of them said, and I think that's fair enough, that if, put it through a caucus vote and caucus wants them back, then by all means. But then the other question is, would you want to come back into caucus necessarily? And I can only guess right now your answer might be along the lines of it depends, or perhaps you've made up your mind on where you want to go with things. How are things looking for you there, Drew?
Yeah, well, thank you, Corey. I'm weighing all my options, talking to my constituents and my family. I'm actually talking to my old UCP board here in the near future. But I'm a little disappointed with that too, with the candidates for running for UCP leadership. I would like to see that, instead of saying, Drew, if you support me, I'll work for you to get you back in. I think what they need to do is clearly call for me and Todd to be back in the UCP caucus. I mean, it was the constituents of Cypress Medicine Hat that voted me in as a UCP. It's clear now that I was ejected for, just speaking up on their behalf, for speaking my mind. Others spoke up louder than me after and were kicked out. So what I would like to see the leadership contestants do is call now for Drew and Todd to be put back in the UCP caucus. Again, the constituents are the ones that every 4 years have that right. Let's open the nominations. All 87 again. We've seen, as Jason Kenney had his thumbs on the scale of everything, when the local constituents had the opportunity to hold their MLAs accountable, and then they weren't allowed to with different people being, not allowed to run and different contests being canceled. I mean, this is just going to drive voter turnout lower. It just shows, it puts lack of trust in the system because local people can't hold their MLAs accountable. So let's start fresh. Here's where we are. Let's call for me to be back in the UCP caucus, and let's open the nominations, and let's see who comes forward.
Oh, that's a fair point. I mean, that's going back to our principles in the past of Wild Rose Party. I mean, the constituency level was sacrosanct, and we still had meddling coming from the leadership that they just can't seem to resist themselves when it comes to that. But the principles there, leave it to the constituents to determine that, and then that person can speak as an individual on their behalf in the legislature. I think we can return to that, or I shouldn't say I'm not a party member anymore, but that's part of, I think, what's going on with the UCP. I mean, when you get a merger, UCP, it was the Wild Rose, it was the PCs. There's still some ideological clashes going on behind closed doors, even if unofficially, and it's making it difficult for that party to function respectfully and effectively.
Yeah, exactly. We need more and more Albertans to be involved. I've been asking them to give us 15 minutes a month, 5 minutes for your country, 5 minutes for your province, and 5 minutes for your municipality. I've advocated that, the UCP and any provincial party should just draw as many nominations as they can handle at one time out of the hat. Make it as random as possible so all 87 constituencies have to have strong memberships and stay involved and be ready to go. It allows less, interference from the party. But, Corey, what's also interesting is from around the province, I've had at least 15 constituencies approach me and say, hey, why don't we look at running, 10, 15, 20 independents around the province and try to be a loose group of independents that believes in, conservative values, but believes first and foremost in standing up for our constituencies and our local needs. And there's a real appetite for that right now from Albertans. So I'm looking forward to the next month or two to discuss this and see what happens.
Well, right on. We're certainly at a turning point in Alberta in this next few months and, this year. I mean, we've got another general election coming. So I appreciate you being a voice for the old common sense and principle out there and Cypress Medicine Hat. And I look forward to seeing, where you go with things as they go. So thanks again for coming on to talk to us today, Drew. It's always a good conversation. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. Just won't be on this show.
Thank you, Corey. All the best wishes to you. Take care.